Here's something that might make you stop and think. In some parts of Pakistan, right now in 2025, major highways actually shut down at night.
Yeah, just imagine that for a second.
It's quite an image. And you combine that with, say, the surprise an average Pakistani might feel seeing, large numbers of Hindus living freely in India.
Which goes against some narratives they might hear.
Exactly. It hints at the complicated and often unexpected reality inside Pakistan today.
And that's really what this deep dive is all about. We're focusing hard on understanding the geopolitical situation within Pakistan as we see it in 2025.
Right.
Our insights are drawn largely from a detailed conversation with the Indian geopolitical expert Sushant Sareen.
Okay.
And he covers a lot of ground. The military, politics, the persistent terrorism challenges, Pakistan's place in the world. It's all interconnected.
So if you're listening and you want to get a solid understanding of this really critical region, especially with all the internal turmoil happening, this is for you.
Yeah, we're aiming to cut through the usual noise.
The headlines, the clutter.
Right. And get to the, let's say, the core truths shaping Pakistan right now. Trying to make it clear, not overwhelming.
So our mission then, what are we trying to unpack here?
Well, based on the source material, we want to explore the really key aspects. So Imran Khan's lingering impact, definitely.
Okay.
How the Pakistani military sees itself, and maybe more importantly, its past actions. The situation in Balochistan, which is, frankly, deeply worrying.
Right.
How China views Pakistan now, and underpinning a lot of this fundamental economic pressures.
Got it. Let's jump right in with Imran Khan then. His legacy. How's that going to look down the road?
Well, the expert we're drawing on suggests a pretty dramatic arc, actually. Initial success and then jail.
Right, the imprisonment.
But then, maybe most significantly, shaking up the military establishment in a way that hadn't really happened before.
So is the idea that his main legacy is already kind of set?
That seems to be the argument, even if people criticize his time as an administrator, and many do.
Terribly, according to the source.
Yes, terrible administrator. But that act of challenging the deep-rooted power structures, that might be the thing that lasts.
But there's a twist, potentially. A risk he might pivot back.
There is that possibility mentioned, yeah. Aligning again with the army he fought against. That would certainly complicate how he's remembered.
And for the army, it sounds like a real dilemma.
Completely.
Yeah.
Can they live with him or can they just not? It's a fundamental question for them.
Which takes us neatly to the military itself. How do they see their role in Pakistan?
Well, the narrative they push, generally speaking, is that they're the saviors, the ultimate protectors of the nation.
The guardians.
Guardians, exactly. But our expert argues pretty strongly that their actions have actually become, well, maybe the biggest obstacle to Pakistan's stability and its growth.
Okay, so let's break down some of those alleged missteps. Things they might reflect on, though maybe unlikely.
Unlikely they'd admit it openly, yes. But the points raised are, first, stunting democracy. This idea of a bonsai democracy.
A bonsai democracy. Explain that a bit.
It means, it looks like a democracy from a distance, but it's been deliberately kept small, controlled, not allowed to grow naturally. Its roots are shallow, essentially.
Okay, constrained. Got it. What else?
Then there's the accusation of essentially looting the state while claiming to defend it, exploiting resources and position.
Right.
Third, a kind of, source calls it a brainless approach, applying purely military thinking and solutions to problems that are actually political, social, or economic.
Like using a hammer for every problem.
Something like that, yes. And finally, the historical weight of the genocide in Bangladesh, the failure to learn from that, with worrying echoes now in Balochistan.
That's quite a list of criticisms.
It is, and it connects to this bigger picture idea.
Yeah.
The military isn't just in the state anymore. It arguably is the state. Its influence is just pervasive, everywhere.
Across all institutions.
Pretty much, yeah. From defense to business to governance, which, raises huge questions about accountability.
So this leads to a stark contrast, the expert points out. These dirty truths about the military versus, finding anything beautiful about Pakistan right now.
Yes, the four dirty truths highlighted are corruption, being brainless in terms of wider governance strategy, repeating the same mistakes, and brutality.
Pretty harsh.
Very. And on the flip side, finding the beautiful aspects is acknowledged as difficult currently. The lens is very much focused on terrorism, internal strife,
Understandably.
But the source does nod towards things like maybe a certain old world charm, hospitality, particularly thinking about Punjab and the North India connection, but it's hard to see past the current issues.
Okay, let's try to personalize this. Imagine an average Pakistani, just hypothetically, placed suddenly in India. What might go through their mind, according to the source?
3 potential thoughts are suggested. First, just, wow, look at India's progress, its development.
Okay, the infrastructure, the economy.
Yeah. Second, a realization perhaps that the stereotypes they might have been fed about Hindus are false. Seeing people just living their lives.
Challenging prejudices.
Exactly. And third, related to that, realizing that maybe the anti-Muslim propaganda about India, which is apparently prevalent in some Pakistani media, is also inaccurate.
So direct experience versus the narrative.
Precisely. Which is a good bridge to talking about Balochistan, because narratives and reality are clashing violently there.
Right, Balochistan is clearly critical. What are the key things our expert thinks a young person there needs to grasp?
4 main truths are outlined. 1, historically, it was a relatively secular place, actually safer for Hindus than some other areas.
Interesting.
2, it's been brutalized by the Pakistani state. Promises made, promises broken repeatedly. 3, there's a deep, unwavering commitment to the Baloch cause, both politically and increasingly through militancy.
And 4.
4, their resources have been systematically stolen, primarily benefiting Punjab. The natural gas example is classic, rich in gas, but locals often last to get it, if at all.
And the situation now is getting worse. You mentioned highways closing.
Yes, the source describes a very serious situation, hijacked trains, highways closing at night. It suggests a real loss of state control in parts of the province. It's not just rhetoric anymore.
And this isn't new, is it? You said the insurgency is 25 years old.
At least. This current intensification is built on decades of that history. The secular roots, the broken promises, the resource exploitation, it's all fueling this fire that's been simmering for a long, long time.
And CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, is playing a role.
A huge role. It's a major grievance. Many Baloch see it as just the latest phase of resource exploitation.
How so?
Well, the promise benefits jobs, development. They aren't materializing for local Baloch people. Instead, they see Chinese workers often living in separate enclaves.
Segregated.
Yeah. They see the project damaging traditional livelihoods like fishing. And ultimately, they see China as essentially backing the state forces that they view as their oppressors. So huge resentment towards China, too.
Is it heading toward, is civil war a possibility?
The expert is careful. Obviously, it doesn't make a definitive prediction. But the situation is described as incredibly dire. You could argue Balochistan is already in a state of low-level civil war or intense insurgency.
And it's not the only place.
No. Similar issues are flaring up in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa with the TTP. There's potential unrest mentioned in Sindh, too. The state seems to be losing its grip in multiple regions.
Wow. So Baloch independence? Likely anytime soon?
Unlikely in the near term is the assessment. Demographics play a part, relatively small populations spread over a vast area. But the alienation is described as total. The struggle has reached a point few expected.
And Pakistan's likely response?
Brute force, primarily. That's the historical pattern. Plus, political manipulation, the appointment of certain figures, like the current chief minister, Sarfraz Bhupti, is seen in that light.
And just to reiterate, this isn't happening in a vacuum.
Absolutely not. You've got the TTP resurgence, potential Sindh separatism, issues bubbling in Gilgit-Baltistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. It's putting immense strain on Pakistan's security forces, stretching them thin.
So if you're a top general in the Pakistani military right now, in 2025, what's keeping you awake at night? What are the big worries?
Okay, based on the source, 5 key things probably dominate their thinking. First, always, India.
The perennial concern.
Perennial concern, yes. Second, Imran Khan. How to handle him, the fact he's eroded their support in their core Punjab constituency, that's a huge problem for them.
Right.
Third, Afghanistan. The Taliban situation, the spillover effects, the TTP safe havens.
The border instability.
Exactly. Fourth, Balochistan, obviously, how to manage that escalating crisis. And fifth, the economy. Just the sheer lack of funds, budget constraints hitting everything.
Let's pivot to China then. How are they looking at Pakistan in 2025? Has their view changed?
It seems so, yes. Quite significantly.
In what way?
Well, the assessment is that China is now seriously concerned about Pakistan's stability. Deeply concerned.
Way more than before.
Yes. And interestingly, they may have essentially written off the money they've already invested through CPEC and other projects. They're not expecting major economic returns anymore, at least not soon.
But Pakistan still has value to them.
Oh, absolutely. Strategic value remains key. It's still seen as, quoting the source, a dog snapping at India's heel, a counterweight,
Okay.
and an ally that gives China a foothold towards the Middle East. So, strategic geography, regional power plays, that value is still there, even if the economic dream has faded for now.
And how does Pakistan see China? Is it still the all-weather friend?
It seems more transactional now. The source suggests Pakistan increasingly views China as the sugar daddy.
Replacing the U.S. role, perhaps?
Perhaps, yeah. There's even that provocative phrase used, a concubine state mentality, implying a deep dependency, almost subservience, driven by the need for cash.
Which leads us directly to the economic reality within Pakistan. What's the situation on the ground?
Pretty grim is the picture painted. Widespread despair, especially among blue-collar workers. Many families rely heavily on money sent back from relatives working abroad.
Remittances are crucial.
Absolutely essential lifeline for many. And if you connect this to the bigger picture, the long-term effect of the military essentially being the showrunners.
The ultimate decision makers.
Yes. That creates chronic instability, which naturally scares off the kind of long-term foreign investment Pakistan desperately needs.
And the military's own economic policies don't help.
Apparently not. The example given is corporate farming initiatives. Vast tracts of land controlled by the army.
Right.
But it raises issues about water rights, who really benefits often foreign entities more than locals, and it could actually stir up more unrest, for instance, in Sindh.
It seems like there's a fundamental disconnect. Technocrats versus politicians versus the army. Who's actually equipped to make good policy?
Well, the expert highlights this mismatch. The army might have the power, but they lack the political skills, the understanding of public sentiment, the trust needed for effective governance. Technocrats might have ideas, politicians might have legitimacy, but the army holds the reins.
Do ordinary Pakistanis realize the extent of the military's control?
Oh, yes. The source suggests the masses are very aware the military runs the country, but there's a sense of powerlessness.
But is that changing?
It seems to be shifting. There's growing resentment, particularly noticeable now even in Punjab, among the upper middle class who are traditionally pro-army. They're starting to criticize openly.
And the army's response?
Draconian laws, crackdowns on dissent, trying to suppress that criticism.
It's a tense situation. Okay, let's do a thought experiment. Highly unlikely, as the expert says, but if you, listening right now, were suddenly made chief of the Pakistani military, what changes should you make based on this analysis?
Right. The impossible hypothetical. 4 key things are suggested. First, pull the army out of politics. Completely.
Back to the barracks.
Back to the barracks. Second, take real political steps in Balochistan. Address the missing persons issue through proper legal means. Start genuine dialogue.
Reconciliation efforts.
Exactly. Third, dismantle the entire infrastructure of terror, not just the groups aimed at India or Afghanistan, but also the Islamist militias used domestically. All of them.
A huge undertaking.
Massive. And fourth, make peace with the neighbors. End the proxy wars. Give up the expansionist claims. Focus inward.
So why doesn't this happen? Why does the military stay so entrenched?
Well, a few reasons are pointed out. One is cultural, this yes-man culture within the ranks, combined with, frankly, megalomania at the top, a sense of indispensability.
And the other?
Money. Simple as that. There are huge financial incentives, legal ones, like massive land grants upon retirement,
Okay.
and illegal ones. Corruption, stock market manipulation, smuggling rings, extortion, all operating with very little real accountability. It's power and profit intertwined.
To understand Balochistan better, can we quickly cover its basic geography and demographics?
Sure. Geographically, it's huge, Pakistan's largest province. Borders Iran and Afghanistan, significant coastline on the Arabian Sea. Critically, it's packed with natural resources.
Gas. Minerals.
Exactly. Which, as we've said, have mostly benefited other regions, not Balochistan itself.
Yeah.
Demographically, it's diverse. You have Pashtun areas in the north, various Baloch tribes dominant in the central regions, different groups along the coast.
And the comparison to the Kurds.
Yes. The source calls the Baloch the Kurds of the subcontinent because, like the Kurds, their traditional homeland straddles the borders of multiple modern states, Pakistan, Iran, Afghanistan.
And how did those borders get drawn in the first place? historically.
Well, focusing on the western borders, the British basically stopped hard at Afghanistan. Too difficult to control, not enough perceived economic benefit, better as a buffer against Tsarist Russia.
Okay.
And the border with Persia, now Iran, defining Balochistan's western edge, was largely formalized through agreements like the Goldsmith Line. These colonial-era boundaries are, of course, part of the historical grievance narrative in the region today.
Right, the lines drawn on maps didn't always match realities on the ground. Let's briefly revisit Imran Khan. Opinions seem incredibly polarized.
Very much so. The assessment paints a really complex picture, maybe megalomaniacal, maybe with good intentions, but also capable of being vicious, vindictive.
Politically savvy, though.
Politically cunning, yes. Surprisingly defiant, even obstinate. But maybe not deeply intellectual. His actual record as PM generally viewed as poor, detrimental policies.
Yet he has this huge following.
Remarkable cult-like following, yes. A very strong, dedicated support base that seems to be expanding. His future, though, seems completely tied up with the current army chief. As long as the current chief is there, it's uncertain. It remains the army's big dilemma.
In the Prime Minister's office, is it just a puppet role?
It varies, is the sense. The current PM, Shehbaz Sharif, is seen as pretty much a complete rubber stamp for the military. His brother, Nawaz Sharif, when he was PM, pushed back more, showed more independence. But historically, many PMs have had very limited real power. Maybe some local influence, but the big decisions made elsewhere.
So when you boil it all down, the core issue is?
The Pakistani military running the country. That seems to be the fundamental problem identified in our source material. Everything else kind of flows from that.
And if, hypothetically, they did step back, what's the likely outcome?
The prediction is it would almost certainly benefit Pakistan in the long run. It would allow civilian governance to mature, allow the country to start tackling some of these deep-seated issues more effectively.
But they don't step back because?
Power, money, both legal perks and illegal corruption. And it's all wrapped up in the rhetoric of needing to protect Pakistan to maintain stability. The justification is always national security.
How do other countries, the big global powers, see all this?
Well, it's a bit of a balancing act for them, isn't it? Especially the U.S. They recognize the military's negative impact, but their top priority often seems to be short-term stability.
Because of the nuclear weapons.
That's the overriding concern, yes.
Yeah.
Preventing nuclear fallout, ensuring the weapons are secure. So they end up working with the military, even if they know it's perpetuating the long-term problems.
A pragmatic but potentially dangerous calculation.
Exactly. It risks kicking the can down the road, potentially leading to an even bigger blow-up later because the root causes aren't being addressed.
Zooming out one last time. Are we just in a more dangerous, unstable world generally now?
It certainly feels that way sometimes. The source reflects on this shift away from maybe a more comfortable, predictable, Western-dominated order.
It's driving it.
You have the rise of China, a resurgent, disruptive Russia, ongoing turmoil in the Middle East, plus an erosion of democratic norms, rule of law in many places globally. It all adds up to more unpredictability, more potential flashpoints. Conflict feels perhaps less remote than it did a decade or two ago.
Okay, so let's try and synthesize this for you, the listener. What are the absolute key takeaways from this deep dive?
I'd say first, the military's grip on Pakistan is incredibly deep, and it has profound consequences for almost everything: politics, economy, stability.
Right.
Second, the situation in Balochistan is extremely volatile, fueled by decades of grievances and now CPEC, representing a major internal crisis. Third, China's view of Pakistan is changing, more concerned, less economically optimistic, but still strategically vital for them.
And Imran Khan.
And fourth, Imran Khan remains this incredibly complex, polarizing figure who has fundamentally challenged the system, and the army still doesn't quite know what to do about him. And crucially, all these things are interconnected.
So what for you listening? Why does understanding Pakistan's internal mess matter?
Well, because it's not just internal. What happens in a nuclear-armed nation of over 230 million people, strategically located, inevitably affects the region and the world. Its stability, or lack thereof, its relationships with neighbors like India, Afghanistan, Iran, its ties to China. It all has ripple effects. It's a critical piece of the global puzzle.
Which leads us to a final thought to leave you with. Given all these intense internal pressures, the military's control, the economic despair, the regional insurgencies, and the complex external dynamics with China, India, the U.S., what are the plausible future paths for Pakistan?
Yeah, how might things evolve? Could we see fragmentation? a slow collapse, or perhaps muddling through? And how would any of those scenarios redraw the map geopolitically?
The choices made inside Pakistan and how the world responds, particularly the prioritization of short-term stability versus long-term reform. These questions will shape the future in really significant ways, something to keep thinking about.